Hello and welcome to the Locker Room. I'm Dominic Unwin. Today I'm joined by Matt Nicoletti and Ricky Kelly. Welcome to you both. On this week's show, Nick Kyrgios is taking time off, but will it help him fire at the Australian Open? And as the Socceroos prepare for their World Cup playoff, we'll discuss the contenders to take over from Ange Postecoglou. First up though in football, Canberra junior Thomas Milicevic was within a few weeks from potentially making a career out of football. But his dream was cut short due to a serious knee injury. He's now back on the path to pursuing his childhood dream, and it's all happening with a new football team in Canberra. Ricky Kelly has the story.
It was at the age of 17 when Thomas Milicevic got the footballing opportunity he had been waiting for, a trial with the Western Sydney Wanderers. Having captained his state to numerous nationals, as well as being shortlisted for a train-on Australian team in 2014, Milicevic worked hard for his opportunity at getting a professional contract.
So Thomas, tell me about how you got the news for the trial and also how you went.
So one day I got asked to come down for a trial by Trevor Morgan, who's the National Youth League coach, and he invited me to the squad for a trial, and then he also invited me to a secondary trial, which would be the weekend after, depending on how well I went, where the squad would be cut down by half, and thankfully I did really well and got asked to come back for a secondary trial.
With one foot already in the door of making a dream come reality, disaster struck for Milicevic and his career was put on hold. He suffered a brutal leg injury in his club game, which saw him receive a grade 3 tear in his right ACL, which prevented him from attending a second trial with the Wanderers, where only a few players were called back to.
I guess this would have been so hard for you to take at the time. Did you think that this was the end of potentially having a career in football?
Yeah, well, when I did my ACL, I thought, life was over, but obviously everyone gets injuries and I thought I could bounce back. But yeah, at that point in time, I was pretty much at my peak and I thought, I could make it, but that wasn't the case.
And did this affect your desire and determination to potentially come back?
Yeah, I really feel like this did affect my desire and determination. I thought the footballing gods were kind of against me at the point in time, and I was so close to fulfilling my dream. But it's not too late to come back and have another crack at it.
Milicevic has been doing everything he possibly can over the past years to get himself back into shape, both physically and mentally, going through numerous stages of rehab with his knee and also building up strength and fitness in the gym. Whilst continuing to focus on the gym, Milicevic spends numerous days in the early hours of the morning working on his own game at the local oval. Having almost fully recovered mentally from this horrific injury, a strong priority now is fine-tuning parts of his football skills. Recently, Milicevic was invited to trial with a train-on Canberra United youth squad, which will be made up of players from Canberra to compete against the fellow A-League youth sides in the next Youth A-League season.
How big of an opportunity is it to train with this squad, and do you think you'll get another chance to potentially trial with another A-League club?
So obviously it's small steps right now, but it is my last opportunity to fulfill my dream. And at this stage, we're versing National Youth League side, so obviously there's going to be a lot of eyes on me. Potentially a chance to maybe get an A-League contract at the end of it.
Current Canberra United Academy youth coach Ryan Grogan says that this is a massive opportunity for these players, given the eyes that will be watching them throughout the season.
So up until this point in time, so over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the youth on the male side in Canberra haven't really had a national platform to showcase what they've got. Being granted this licence now gives them the opportunity to show basically what they've got on the national stage and be looked at by coaches at A-League clubs and the national team staff as well.
With this potentially being Milicevic's last shot at a career in professional football, every run, training session and pull-up could make all the difference.
Ricky Kelly reporting for Now UC News.
Let's move from football to tennis, and given the re-emergence of Federer and Nadal, the next Australian Open is much anticipated. Nick Kyrgios has also announced he's taken time off before the Open. Boys, is this a good decision?
Yeah, look, I believe it is a good decision that Kyrgios is deciding to take some time off the court because, let's be honest, we all know Kyrgios is his own worst enemy, especially when he's out there. So him taking this time off could be a bit, therapeutic for him and really regroup himself to have his best crack at the Australian Open in January.
Yeah, I think it's good for him to, refresh his head. There's been a lot of media hype around him and spotlight this past season. So I think it'd be good for him. We've seen with some good players, Federer, Nadal, they've taken time off in the past, prepare for a big tournament. It worked well for Federer. He took the French Open off. He came back and he actually won Wimbledon. Nadal, when he had that niggling wrist injury in the US Open, he came back and made the final against Federer in the Aussie Open. So I think it'd definitely be good for Kyrgios.
We've recently seen Federer and Nadal play out a final at the Shanghai Masters. Are you expecting this to be the thing come January?
I mean, well, it's been them two all season, really. I can't remember anyone else who's won a title, to be honest. It's been tit for tat, 2 Grand Slams each. They recently played in the Shanghai Masters final recently. It has been all them. I definitely reckon they're going to be up there.
Look, don't forget about Murray and Djokovic as well. Obviously, they both had very disappointing seasons. None of them won a Grand Slam. They both had a terrible Australian Open in 2017, with Murray getting knocked out in the second round and Djokovic in the first round. They both really have something to prove. Of course, Djokovic, 6-time Australian Open champion. Murray has made the final of the Australian Open 5 times, but hasn't won, which means there's even more for him to prove. So, yeah, let's not forget about those two. They're still big guys in the form of tennis.
They definitely have been forgotten, but, in the grander scheme of things, you can't really, go past that big four. They're going to be around there. Do you think there are any potential roughies for the tournament?
Look, I'm going to go with Grigor Dimitrov and Del Potro. With Dimitrov, he made the semi-final of the Australian Open in 2017, and he was that close to making the final. He only lost to Nadal in the end, which was a terrific matchup. And then you've got Del Potro, of course, with the massive comeback from injury, and it was almost heroic. I mean, he ended up losing, he ended up beating Federer in the quarterfinal, but only lost to Nadal, who was, of course, the winner in the semi-final. So those are 2 standouts I think you should be watching for at the Australian Open.
Well, it's interesting that we're calling these players roughies. I mean, they're top 10 players, so it's definitely shows the current era of tennis that we're in and how good the top 4 really are. For me, Stan Wawrinka, I think he's won it before. The only slam he hasn't won is at Wimbledon. He loves the hard court and he's won plenty of titles. I think he's definitely one to look out for. And potentially ranked 3 and 4, Thiem and Zverev, 2 younger players, so they're up there. I mean, ranked 3 and 4, you can't definitely write them off, and I think it's time one of them maybe take it out.
We're still a couple of months out, but do we have any predictions for the final?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be. I think this generation of tennis that we're seeing, it's kind of not taking anything away from the Djokovic's, Nadals and Murrays. They're still going to be there, and they're definitely a threat. But I think it's the time now to see a young player really hit their stride. Thiem and Zverev, in particular, like I said, they've made plenty of semi-finals and quarterfinals this calendar season. So I think they're peaking, and I think it's going to be time for one of them.
Look, I'm probably going to go with the popular opinion here, but I'd love to see a Nadal-Federer final once again, because obviously they both won 2 Grand Slams each last time. This is basically like the 5th set, you know what I mean? Like, whoever wins this could, determine who a lot of people think is the greatest between those two. And not just that, if it's that final, this could be like the biggest final in the history of tennis, let alone just the Australian Open. So I just cannot wait for the Australian Open this year. It's going to be terrific.
Definitely be something to tell the grandkids about. Well, moving from rackets to rucks, and Australian rugby has enjoyed the year from hell. Falling attendances, horrid form from the Wallabies and the Super Rugby teams, and of course the axing of the Western Force have left the ARU battered and bruised. But there is one glimmer of hope. The National Rugby Championship, the level below Super Rugby, continues to go from strength to strength and is finally providing an answer to Australian rugby's biggest problem, its depth. Viking Park may seem far from the world stage, but it's here that the Wallabies' failing fortunes could be turned around. The Vikings group recently acquired the licence for Canberra's National Rugby Championship side and are looking to take the team to a whole new level. Australian rugby has long failed to provide a pathway for club players to transition into Super Rugby, but that could be well on its way to changing. Andrew Robinson is one such player who has professional ambitions but is yet to secure a Super Rugby contract. While the Vikings may play in front of sparse crowds, Robinson says the step up on the field is invaluable.
The speed and tenacity of the games is just remarkable. It is as exactly what they want for the competition. It is, that sort of step or 2 up from just local club football. And that is what the NRC is all about. It's all about the development of players and, being able to broadcast yourself on that next sort of platform. It is a bridging program between club level and then the professional league.
Vikings captain Tom Cusack has already made that leap. Cusack was part of the inaugural NRC as well as the Rio Sevens team. This year he was rewarded with a Brumbies contract and says the competition is critical to Australian rugby.
You compare a lot of blokes who played a lot of Super Rugby. I've only played a handful of games, but a lot of boys that have played a lot have said this is a faster paced game. And it's definitely a massive step up from club rugby, and you can see the development amongst the Australian population, Australian rugby, and how it's actually producing great players.
While Wallaby Gold may be a while off, Players and officials alike will be looking to see more and more club players stepping up to Super Rugby level.
We're in the foundations of those stages, and if we're able to continue this for multiple years, it's not just something that's going to come straight away. So it's like you said, it's something that's going to have to be put in for a couple of years and to hopefully reap rewards further down the track.
Robertson will hope that's not too far around the corner.
I've always dreamed of playing for the Brumbies. You know, I've lived in Canberra all my life, so ideally I'd like a phone call from one of them. But yeah, again, you know, I wouldn't pass up an opportunity elsewhere.
Dominic Unwin, Now You See News. Well, sticking with the theme of struggling national sides, and the Socceroos play for their World Cup lives next month when they take on Honduras. But it looks like it could be Ange Postecoglou's last hurrah as coach. If Australia gets through, boys, who should take the team to Russia?
Look, I think it should be an international manager because at the end of the day, I still think Ange Postecoglou is the best Australian manager overall. So if you're going to go Australian, it's kind of taking a step back. But I think they're probably going to go with Josip Gombau, obviously former Adelaide United coach, as you all know, and he's currently on that Socceroo setup. And for the FFA, he will kind of put that set that long-term attacking possession-based football that the FFA really wants from the Socceroo. So I think they'll go with Gombau. It's the easiest option for them.
Yeah, I think international is the right choice tactically. Preferably for me, Bert van Marwijk. He coached the Netherlands to World Cup final in 2010 against Spain, which he unfortunately lost. But he's definitely got the resume and the credentials there to slot straight in. He's free. He just recently parted ways with Saudi Arabia, so that's also another dynamic. He knows the Asian scene quite well. So I think he's the great pick. I think we need to pick him.
You both got international candidates. I'll take you back around 4 years where you had coaches of the rugby, cricket and football teams, all foreigners. Within a space of a few months, they'd all lost their jobs, along with this sort of theme running through Australian sport that, you know, Australian national teams must be coached by an Australian, because only they know how to play it the Australian way. If they continue with that theme, are there any outstanding Australian candidates?
Look, if that's the truth and you want to go Australian, I don't think you should go past Graham Arnold. He, of course, won the A-League with Sydney FC last season. Now, I know he was the coach of the Socceroos back in 2007 at the Asian Cup. However, 10 years have passed. He's matured as a coach. He's won 2 A-League finals, and then he's also made another 2. And he'll just bring that passion. He'll bring that passion that Australia needs, and he'll bring that bit of strictness that Australia needs to, kick themselves into gear again.
Yeah, well, speaking of the passion, I think the name that comes to my mind is Kevin Muscat. I mean, he's been labelled as a hothead before. Tactically, probably maybe not the best coach, but I think if you're going to pick an Australian coach and you're going to go with that aggression kind of that stance, definitely pick Kevin Muscat. We saw Ange Postecoglou when they travelled to Thailand for the World Cup qualifier earlier this year. They took a soft approach, in my opinion, and I think Muscat being in the team, having coached the team, I think would have been a completely different dynamic. They would have gone over there with the mentality, we're going to sweep this team off our feet. It's a World Cup qualifier. So I think his presence in the squad alone will just really rev the team up.
I know a lot of people would consider him an honorary Australian, but boys, would you take Gus Hiddink just for the World Cup?
Look, Dom, I wouldn't go there, to be honest. Look, Gus Hiddink recently in his past few coaching jobs hasn't exactly done too well. I mean, you don't have to look past the Netherlands and his job there, except obviously that's a poison chalice. But I would say in the past 7 years, all his coaching jobs, besides his one with Chelsea, where obviously in 2008-9, but also the one most recently where he got them from the relegation zone back up to 10th. But besides that, he's kind of lost his touch, I'm sorry to say.
I disagree. I think he'd be great for the Australian national team. I mean, it's one of those success stories. I mean, form's temporary, class is permanent. Hasn't had the best results lately, but I think his success from 2006 at the World Cup was.
It was 10 years ago, Ricky.
Oh, of course,
No,
but I think Australia will get behind him. I think coming back to the team, everyone remembers what he did in 2006, and football was great back then. I feel like the fans at the moment. Australia is not behind Ange, and we're not behind the team. There's just a real bad smell in the team at the moment, but I think it'd really freshen up the team, putting Gus back for sure.
I think you both have valid points, but I do think Australian football and the FFA really need a feel-good story, and Gus Hiddink would definitely provide that. But, with silence coming out of Whitlam Square, when we're really in the dark about it, it's going to take forever for a successor to be announced. So we're going to move on, and grand finals are tough to lose, especially when a team starts as a clear favourite. This was the case for the Belconnen Magpies in the 2017 AFL Canberra decider. The Magpies headed into their second grand final in 3 years after finishing as minor premiers. They had also beaten their opponents Ainslie twice during the season, but all of that counted for nothing on the biggest day of the season, and in the end, Belconnen was convincingly beaten by 42 points. Magpies 21-year-old fullback Reece Healy sat down with the locker room's Tom Falco to recall the day.
Reece, take me back to that weekend in September. You're heading into the grand final as favourites. after knocking off Ainsley during the year and finishing up as minor premiers. What do you remember about the day?
I actually had a really good feeling about the day. I don't know what it was, but I remember when we lost in 2015, something wasn't feeling right. But I don't know, 2017 it felt good. Day felt good, and I don't know, just little things kept popping up that made me think that today was the day. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case.
Can you describe the feeling of what it was like when the final siren went?
It was quite emotional, like probably a bit of tears going around amongst the boys and stuff. But it wasn't like, because obviously the game was sort of lost well before the final siren, so you've sort of been building up to that stage. But then it's just that you realise that season's done, and obviously it sucked. And like you see, like you look at the winning side, how like they're all together, like they're all embracing stuff. Whereas you look at the losing side, and you're all sort of spread around the ground, like in a bit of despair.
You mentioned you knew you had lost the game before the final siren. At what point did you feel like the game was beyond you?
Going into the last term, I reckon we still had a sniff. Like we played some decent football leading into that. It was a rough day, but like we're finally piecing together a little bit at the end of that third quarter. And then I think we needed to kick the first goal or two, and then to really be in it. But then once they kicked 2 or 3 on the trot, then it was pretty much done by then. So about 20 minutes before the final siren.
I know it was really emotional in the rooms after the game. What did James Bennett, the coach, say to the boys?
He wasn't trying to sugarcoat it. Like he obviously said, like this sucks, and we're all sore losers, and like we've got to hurt and stuff. But then he said, look, we've had a good season, and I think if you look at it, like at the start of the year, with our list versus like Ainsley and stuff, we would have been happy to push them throughout the season. But to be able to actually beat them and dominate them in a lot of games meant that, going to that grand final, like we had those high expectations.
Is it something you think about regularly?
I wouldn't say I think about it every day. Like, I guess it comes and goes sort of thing. Like at the moment, because cricket season's starting and stuff like that, like I've been able to like jump into cricket and sort of put football at the back of my mind for a few months before it starts up again. But yeah, look, you obviously have a few moments here and there where you think about it, and it just doesn't sit quite right. But like there's not much you can do.
Does it serve as motivation heading into next year?
Well, obviously, like I think it's a really big test for us actually. Like I think when we lost last time, like 2015, the turnaround in 2016 was shocking. I didn't think like our first 3-4 months of pre-season, like really, we didn't get much out of it. But I think this time, I think as long as we can keep the same group together, we'll be able to keep that going in, and definitely serve as a bit of motivation.
To finish up today, we're going to take a look at an off-field matter. Sport is full of egos and athletes who are more than happy to lap up all the fame and adulation. But are we finally getting bored with all the tedious athletes who lack humility and sportsmanship? Boys, to kickstart this discussion, I'm going to give you 2 very contrasting examples. The AFL and NRL Grand Finals, both captains, losing captains, got up to make their speech. Adelaide's Taylor Walker probably was up there for a maximum of 40 seconds, barely thanked anyone, had a pot shot at his teammates. Gavin Cooper, the Cowboys captain, contrastingly, thanked everyone, congratulated the Storm, and really took his time to reflect on the season. My question is, in this era of professionalism, is humility still relevant?
Yeah, it definitely is relevant, Dom, and I think it was poor form from Tex, in my opinion. I think, he's a professional at the end of the day. That's his job, and he needs to set an example for young captains who are 15, 16 years old who want to be a captain. I mean, losing's a part of sport, and it happens. I haven't lost a grand final of that calibre myself, so obviously I can't comment on that, but at the end of the day, he's a professional, and he should be speaking better than that. We saw Gavin Cooper, the media took a feel-good story out of it, and that's what should happen across all sports codes when, a losing team loses a grand final. So I thought it was poor from Tex.
Now, look, I understand where you're coming from, and you're right, but you got to look at where he was at that point in time, right? It's the heat of the moment. They just lost the grand final. They've been working all year for it. For some people, working their whole lives to get to that point. You're absolutely distraught when you win that final. So just keep that, you got to keep that in mind when we're talking about these sort of situations, and straight after the game, interviews and all that sort of stuff.
I completely agree. Heat of the moment. I mean, as I said, I've never been in that moment, but I could imagine he would have been going through. It's not nice. But if we look at an example from the NFL, when Peyton Manning a couple of years ago lost the Super Bowl, there's a lot of pressure on him that game. It was his worst loss ever in the Super Bowl grand final. Richard Sherman, the running back from the Seattle Seahawks, injured his ankle during the game. Peyton Manning went over to him at the end of the game to see if he was all right. So I think that shows, the kind of humility and respect, attitude, and sportsmanship that's needed in sport. Like I said, losing is a part of sport. So yeah, I thought Tex, was very poor of him.
Well, one guy who knows a lot about losing is Andy Murray. He's dealt with a lot of personal failure, but I guess it comes back to image. And Andy Murray, he's lost a lot of times. People probably would have forgiven him if he's sulking after the game after yet another loss, but he always speaks well, thanks everyone, and is very, very calm after the game. Is he a good image, a good example?
A great example for young tennis players, how bad would that be? He's never won Australian Open and he's lost 4 to Djokovic, so it'd be absolutely heartbreaking for him, and to speak so well at every grand final speech, I think that's great. So pretty much to sum things up, I think Tex Walker should really take a walk.
And beyond that, we'll finish the program. That's all we have time for. Thank you, Ricky and Matt, for your insights today. For all the latest news, go to our website, nowuc.com.au. I'm Dominic Unwin, and we'll catch you next time in the locker room. That was fucking